In this episode of the Business of E-commerce, I talk with John J. Wall about using artificial intelligence to help grow your business. This is a Business of E-commerce, episode 97. Welcome to the Business of E-commerce, the show that helps e-commerce retailers start, launch, and grow the e-commerce business. I'm your host, Charles Plesky, and I'm here today with John Wall. John speaks, writes, and practices at the intersection of marketing, sales, and technology. He is a partner and the head of business development for Trust Insights. He also produces the Marketing Over Coffee podcast with his co-host, Christopher S. Penn. I asked John on the show today to chat a bit about how you can use artificial intelligence to help grow your business. Hey, John, how you doing today?
Good.
Awesome to have you on the show. I've been personally a fan of the Marketing Over Coffee podcast. How long have you guys do it for? A long time. How long have you guys been doing it for?
Yeah. It's been over 12 years.
Wow.
Approaching 600 episodes, weekly. So yeah, it's just been a blast. We've had fun with it, and the community is just amazing. It's so great to be able to talk to marketing and tech people who know what you do, know what your job is all about, and we've had a blast with it.
Yeah, it's very cool too. If you're into both marketing and tech, it definitely has that spin on it. So it's not just straight like how to run Facebook ads. It's more kind of the higher level, right? That you guys talk about.
Yeah, and what we're able to do, there's so much going on with marketing and tech that, so basically alternating weeks, it'll be me and Christopher Penn, and we can talk about, what's going on, what are the new tactics and what's changing, what to keep your eye on. And then I do mix it in there too we have a lot of authors that we're able to get in touch with and talk to. So, we've had Seth Godin, Meerman Scott, Mitch Joel, all kinds of folks on. And yeah, so I like to alternate between kind of tactical frontline that you can actually make money with today, but then we do back up and do, more 50,000 foot interviews too, to kind of just know what's going on in the industry and keep your eye on the long game.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the podcast, so I think people should check that out. And then
thank you. Yeah.
With AI, so I feel like this topic comes around every couple of years. And we talk about AI and then it's like, not really happening, and then everyone kind of it falls off. But it feels like it's starting to become a little more real now. Like it's really happening, and people are starting right, because I feel like we talked about this, people have talked about this 10 years ago, and AI is right around the corner, and then it wasn't anymore. But then it happened again, and each time I feel like we're getting closer. So where are we now with AI, and how are people actually using it with e-commerce today?
Right. Well, so to back up a bit, you make a great observation in that it comes and it goes. And unlike other tech, like SEO and search engine and social media, all those terms are made up when those markets were created. Artificial intelligence has been kicked around since, I think it was 1956 was the first time that was talked about. And so what it is artificial intelligence is just this bucket where we throw anything that's 2 or 3 years out. Anything that we think is coming down the pipe gets thrown in, and they just say, oh, that's artificial intelligence. But then, 2 or 3 years pass and it finally comes around, and now we call it search engine or we call it social media. Or, it kind of loses the AI thing. So we are at, a lot of people argue, are we really there or not? But there's so much computational power available right now. It's unprecedented, and it's finally crossing over that pretty much anybody can get access to it. And so having this much computational power in your hands is bringing us to a point where, and to be more precise about it, it's machine learning is really what's become, is coming of age, and people are able to kind of get on board with. So the idea that you could take any data set, say, your last 3 years worth of orders, you could have hundreds of thousands of orders and run a machine learning algorithm against that and find out what's in that data pile. That's the kind of thing that you would have had to, rent computer time somewhere and a data scientist to do that for you. But now if you're willing to kind of dig in and get your hands really dirty, you can do those kinds of projects, or you can have somebody do it for you, and it's not insanely expensive. You can, for a couple $1,000s, you can start to use some machine learning to analyze your data. And that's where we are today. So it's moving a lot, but it's just a lot of what I've been doing with Trust Insights is, you go in and you talk to people and they really have no idea what the heck they're buying if they're looking for artificial intelligence or machine learning. And so you have to kind of back up and figure out, okay, what are we trying to do? And then figure out which forms of AI or machine learning or whatever will get you where you want to go.
Yeah, I feel like we're finally at a place too where the data collection just kind of happens. Like it's always like orders, for example, you just have all that data. So if you have 3 years of order history, you just can collect pretty much unlimited data at this point, and then you can start making, certain inferences from that data set, right? So you kind of are silently collecting in the background, and then 3 years later, you can pull up and say, "Hey, what's the, which orders did we make profit on? How did our P&L look for these orders? How are these different things?" So you actually now can collect all that and bring all that data in one place. Finally.
Yeah, absolutely. So. And that's been pretty good for the past couple of years. The big sea change in the past 2 or 3 years is now having that data and being able to get other data sources too. So it's like you've got your whole e-commerce solution, and now you can grab huge data sets from your social media accounts or from publicly available data sources on what's happening with shipping containers or, things like that can give you ideas on long-term trends. And then closing the gap too of, okay, so you've got your e-commerce, but are you getting everything from a single customer, if it's on mobile, if it's on desktop, if it's on brick and mortar, even if you have that. So yeah, it's the single systems are in a great shape where you do pretty much by default have everything. And now we're at this point too, where you can get other data sources, and all you need, if you kind of get those integrated and strung together, you have more data than you ever had before.
Yeah. What is some examples of like custom, not customer names per se, but just kind of things you've done with users that are almost like surprising sort of thing of, wow, we can actually do this today. Some like concrete examples of how or I guess we're saying AI, but it's really machine learning. And I know for the AI geeks out there, everyone gets kind of a little defensive of this term. So yeah, what are some like concrete examples of when you use machine learning?
One example for us that has had a decent return on it is looking at everything in your content library and everything in your customer journey, looking at everything you've got out there, and then sending machine learning algorithms out to determine what are the critical checkpoints and when do they happen. So you can come back with a graph and say, okay, look, so in the average 4-month buying cycle for this product, we can see that in the first 3 months, these are the 3 things that everybody tends to hit. As they cross this threshold here, these 1 or 2 marketing programs are the most effective. And then we see the indicators at the end of, these are the ones that are already there when we close. And then you're also able to test, okay, so you kind of know which ones are the checkpoints they always hit, which ones are directly correlated to that too. So you can look at certain things and ultimately say, hey, look, if we drive more traffic to these 2 or 3 videos, we know that will pay out with business over the next 4 months. Or we can look at all of our web pages that have product information and say, okay, so these 3 or 4 pages here are the most common, and we know that if somebody hits 3 or 4 out of those, that they're most likely to end up closing a deal. And from that, you can decide whether, where to attack or defend. So for defense, you can see pages that, look, we're already ruling on search engine results for this. Like our pages come up at the top of the list. So let's every quarter make sure we're updating this content so it stays at the top of the list. You can defend those pages. And then you can also see the attack pattern too. You can say, okay, here's 10 or 20 pages that are very easy to score for. If we just do some content on these, we can be sure that we're going to be number 1, 2, 3 in the results for these pages here, just with a limited lift, and then knowing which pages to stay away from too. You can see that, hey, if we could spend 4 years going after these pages and we're never going to get on the first page of results for it, so it's just not worth fighting. But this idea that you can look at your whole marketing campaign stack and figure out what's effective and what you need to spend more money on, that's the kind of thing that really can change the bottom line for a customer.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of folks do this, but in a very like manual fashion, right? Where a lot of folks, you have your analytics and you can kind of pull out some reports and back into some numbers, and then you kind of have your order data, pull that out, try to back into some numbers, and everyone's kind of taking Excel data and making drawing their own conclusions from the Excel data, right? Basically dumping everything into Excel, drawing their conclusions, and doing this, right? Like, where do you actually hook in the machine learning part? Into, like, what does the machine learning do, and how does it actually get the data and make those decisions for you?
Yeah, sure. So it's a great point because we joke about Excel hell. Most people are just kind of trapped in this place where once a quarter or once a month they're having to churn all these spreadsheets and feed a bunch of pivot tables, to get to the bottom line and try and figure out what's going on. And so when you switch to a machine learning model for this, right now it's at a point where it pretty much does have to get built from scratch. And so most machine learning, data scientists are using either Python to programmatically go out and grab from certain data sources, or they're using R as another statistical analysis tool. But really what you're doing is connecting everything and building a single data source. So everything is feeding into this, and then you have the machine learning algorithms are running against that and delivering back to you a dashboard. When you test it and you originally set it up, you will just deliver back CSV files and reports to see what's going on. But ultimately, you want to get to a point where it comes up in a dashboard so you can look at it every day. And the ultimate with that is if you get to a point where it's real time. With every order that comes in, it's going into the data pile and the algorithms are being rerun. And again, because we have all this computational power, it takes 4 or 5 minutes to rerun the algorithm every time. And so then you get to a point where you can see real time and you can take advantage of things when they happen. Okay, so if certain terms start spiking or falling, you can adjust your ad spend. You can say, okay, so here's the content we need to post today. These 3 topics are suddenly hot, so we want to get content out there. But yeah, it's still, it's not like you just buy an attribution tool and see what's going on. You do have to kind of build the thing as a model, test it for a while, and continually tune it. But it's the results give you an exponential lift. Whereas your competitors might be only once a quarter figuring out what works. Every day you're optimizing and reallocating resources to get the most out of them.
Yeah, it reminds me of missing the name, but the Ray Dalio book, based on the hedge fund. I'll think of the name. We can put it in the show notes. But they basically talked about how they would use, they would pull in lots of data and then kind of build their own models internally and then keep feeding in the data essentially in real time. And then the model would just run in the background. So after they would come up with the model, but the machine would just pull all the data and then return them the numbers. So they would know on Thursday, all of a sudden, a little red light would flash on the dashboard, and they needed to go do something at that point. And it could always just run in the background at that point.
Yeah, exactly. It's prescriptive. It's actually telling you what's going on. And so we work with 2 levels of machine learning too. There's guided learning where you're telling the algorithm, hey, we're looking for this, go find this stuff, and it churns through. But at the other side of that, it's where it's not guided learning. The system just grabs the whole entire data set and looks for clusters. It's actually churning through the whole pile of data, and it will bring back, clusters that you never even realized were there. I'm trying to think of a good. So we had a large church. We do work with a lot of large churches because they just have these huge data sources. And what we found in certain ad markets was that people who are pet fans, dog or cat fans, and hang out in dog or cat communities were like 3 times more likely to respond to campaigns. For some reason, these were, whether it was they had more empathy for other people or something. We hadn't even dug down to the bottom of it yet, but we did find out that, hey, if we add that as another select to this data source, the results double or triple. And so it's those kinds of things. And like you said, the real benefit is having it run real time because, for our situation where it was, church members, that really doesn't change. People's personalities don't change too much over time. So if you learn that once a quarter, that would be fine. But let's say it's a financial market and, one of your variables is the price of a commodity or oil or something like that, then yeah, you've got to know every day like where it's at, because knowing, 2 weeks later that you should have moved last Thursday is of no use to you. You're not going to be able to leverage that and take advantage of it.
Yeah, I feel like when this got popular years ago, everyone kind of had the thought of a big data set, but the data was always in silos, right? Where you had your analytics data, you had it was always stuck wherever it was. But this is all of a sudden, it became possible now, right? Because you have these APIs and you can just suck data out of 100 different data sources, normalize it, and then work with it in one place. And I feel like that's what's kind of making this more actually real now. Is that normalization of the data?
Yeah, you've hit a huge point there. I mean, you're right on the mark. It's there is a lot of the man behind the curtain thing, because yes, you can string all this together, but really for the majority of our customers, we will come in and talk about doing these, either machine learning and predictive analysis too, which is a huge part of being able to look at a data set and say, here's what to expect for the next 6 months or year, to be able to look forward. There's huge opportunity there. But yeah, pretty much everybody we go in with, we find out oh, actually, the data is not normalized. You've got a data quality problem here, and you still have a couple silos here and there that we need to pull from, and there's still a ton of work that needs to be done. So yeah, the dirty little secret is, if you go down this path, make sure you budget to spend a ton of time getting the data clean and straight, because that tends to be a real heavy lift.
In your example, though, so there's the example where I kind of know the model. We, hire a data scientist, bring in all the data, and they basically codify my model I already know to give me real-time notifications of that model, right? So I've already kind of figured out the problem, and I just need someone to kind of build an algorithm to identify, hey, when the price of oil moves, I should go buy some Facebook ads, whatever that happens to be. The example you gave about pet owners, right, doing better, how do you actually build a model that takes all the data and then just finds that cluster in the data set and says, yeah, that's it right there? It's if you're pulling in model about data about commodities, pets, SEO, all this stuff, and how do you actually build the model to say, yep, it's dogs? That's the thing. That's the key.
Right. Where does it come? It's the first thing is cataloging all the available data sets. So they have a ton of information already on all of their members in that case. So you pull all of that. Then it's everything that's available via all the social networks. So hopefully you've got the data on which social networks they're in, and you're able to pull all of that. Web analytics is huge. Being able to, even if it's not personally identifiable, but being able to get global demographics on who's visiting the website and when they come back and what they do in return visits is very valuable. And then a lot of it is publicly available data sets, and that's kind of why you would hire an outside data scientist, because somebody who's done a project for 5 other churches has already done the legwork of trying to figure out what other data sources are available or which ones are best. And so, yeah, it's just a matter of how many different data models, how many different data sources can you get wired into your model, and then running all the testing to see, are they valid? Does it affect the results in any way? But yeah, it's, really it was a combination of internal data, external social data. Another thing that we do that's fairly unique too is, a lot of people with social data, they dig into just followers or publishing volume, how much stuff they're putting out and how much it's shared. But what we found is that it's really the next layer of engagement that's valuable. It's not that a Kardashian put out 100 tweets today and they have 20 million followers. You want to look at users when they put something out, it then gets commented on and retweeted and other users share it. What stuff actually has influence? Everybody's talking about influencers on all these social channels, but who puts content out there that gets shared and gets passed around and commented on? Those are the folks that you want to keep an eye on and keep track of. And they tend not to be the top decile of users. They tend to be a few rungs down. And of course, they're a lot more cheaper to work with too, if you're going to do stuff with them. But by digging into that engagement data, you get a little bit different picture of how the information is really shared and what really matters. And so that's another kind of unique data set that can get folded into the mix and into the model.
I like that. So let's say someone's listening and they're like, I like this idea, but I'm a little, skeptical of will it work for me? Like, can they apply it to their business? And they kind of want to build a mini version of this on their own and try it and just see, proof of concept. Does this work? How could someone go about doing some sort of small, test, just see something like this work on their own? Or can they? Is that even possible on a small scale?
Yeah, you really do have to kind of cross the line and, figure out how to use a package like R or IBM has some data science tools. But yeah, it's a big jump. I mean, you either need to decide to do that. In fact, we would suggest don't think of it as just grabbing data sets and trying to churn through them and get learning out of that, but make sure that and start with your web analytics process is in order. Make sure that you've got goals set up for your web analytics. I mean, we have tons of customers that don't even have goals set up. And you not only want to have goals, but you want to attach dollar values to those goals. So that, if it's a new name comes in and hits a video, well, you're at your cost per lead, that's probably worth anywhere from $100 to $400. And then, of course, if you can't attribute a single if you're not just selling the same product all the time at the same price, at least get some kind of average so you can say, okay, once that first sale is closed, that customer is then worth $100, $400, $5,000 to us over the lifetime of that customer. And that's really the place to start getting the model together of let's look at where they come in from, how long it takes to get to a sale, which checkpoints did they hit along the way, how much are they worth at the end. And that's what kind of gives you the first pile of data that you can dig into and get some real insights out of. And the one that I always hit on is everybody focuses on getting the winners. They think like, okay, these two campaigns here are the ones that make all the money for us. But really the benefit that most people see when they start out is after 1 or 2 years of gathering this data, you're going to find programs that, oh, wait, we've been doing this for 2 years and we've never had a lead from this, or there's never been a deal out of this. And so you can cut that off and go test something else with those funds. And that's where the kind of the first wins show up. So yeah, starting with data science is a heavy lift. And so we really encourage everybody to start with attribution, so in sales and marketing speak, it's attribution. In machine learning and AI, you're talking about driver analysis. And that's easy to do on your own without having to get heavy into determining which algorithms you want to use.
Okay, so is that something you could do in Excel sort of thing, or do you actually need a real like data science tool for that?
No, yeah, you can do that in Excel, and in fact, I mean, that's kind of how I got my start with a lot of attribution stuff was, yeah, you've got salesforce.com. You dump all your campaign data to Excel and then use some pivot tables to sort those. And yeah, that'll give you at least a rough picture. And so at first level with that in Excel and pivot tables, you can totally see all your marketing campaigns. Then, you can see the campaigns that are driving and the ones that are not doing anything. And then another level you can lay on that is you can also do analysis of the deals and competitors. As long as you're tracking your competitors in every deal, you can then go in and get some kind of neat insights as far as like, okay, every time we face off against this vendor here, we know we've got like a 60 or 70% chance of winning. And that can, and also the reverse too. You can realize that, oh, wait, out of the 20 times we've gone up against these guys, we've lost every time. And that gives you something else to dig in, either figure out if you want to change your attack or just give up if somebody's using those because, they're always cheaper than you and you guys know the product is junk. Maybe you stop chasing that trashy business.
So probably it sounds like the first step will be getting all the data out of some of these data sources into something, let's just say Excel for the beginning process, and then start building some sort of almost like a dashboard in Excel of saying, hey, like when this and that and this happens, let's show this, and kind of just build your own models essentially of connecting all these different data sources and showing it in one place. Is that kind of first step?
That's right where we want to be. In fact, and you can do that as long as it scales. The thing is, depending on how big your business gets, you'll get to a point where eventually you choke Excel and it can't handle the data any further, and you'll have to. But by that point, if you're doing that much business, you'll be able to throw other resources at it. Yeah, and then it becomes a question of, do you want to do your data science in-house, or do you want to get somebody to help you with it, or is it just enough to get another tool that will get you close to where you want to be? But yeah, the big thing is to be able to, at least on a quarterly basis, look at all the leads that have come in and where they come in, and have an idea of, how you're going to continue that, where you're going to spend the money to get more, and look at all the closed stuff and say, okay, what's closing, what's working, and how can we replicate the bright points to continue growing.
Got it. So now, let's say someone started doing this and they're like, I actually found some things, and there was a payback, and I want to do more of it, right? So now they want to kind of probably engage with a data scientist or someone like yourself. How would you even go about finding someone to help you with this? Like, what are you even searching for? What's the title? Are you looking for a consultancy? Are you looking to hire a person? Like, who are these people, and how do you even find them? And how do you know that good? Because that's the other thing. It's like this new term of like, I'm a data scientist. And you're like, oh, are you good at that? Like, I don't even know how to ask them, are they good at their job? Like basically have to ask, are you good? And they're like, yes, I'm good. And you're like, all right, hi. So how do you actually ask that? And how do you know that?
Yeah, no, that it's, you can only look at past results. So definitely have people, who have you worked with in our space or similar spaces, show us some sample reports of what this looks like. And then, yeah, it's funny. This is when they talk about blue sky markets, like this is totally brand new. There's not a lot of established vendors that have proven that they can do this over time. So
like I remember back in the day when everyone started doing SEO, right? It was like, everyone just put their shingle on and say, and I'm SEO expert. And you're like, cool. Like, I don't, and at the time, no one really knew what it meant. So you're just like, oh, they're an expert. They must be good. Like, I feel like we're at that point now where like, you don't even know how to tell if they're good.
Yeah. Well, and then it's, you've got the people that are doing cutting edge work. And then there's the second wave of people that are just kind of copying and using cheap tools that, like you said, with SEO, there was that time where, you might hire somebody and they would do something weird and shady, like create, 2,000 websites, on a spammy server pointing to you, and, your results go up for 3 weeks. And then next thing you know, you get, blackballed by Google, and you're not sure, you lose all your business in, like in 2 months.
They've read an ebook from like 2 years ago, and they applied like a 2-year-old tactic on, today. And then all of a sudden, yeah, exactly. I remember those days. So how do you know you're not in that? Those are fun days. And we've moved past that. And there were people like for SEO, like a Moz or someone like that, where you went and they were the experts that kind of had that, they were kind of the ones you looked at, like the gold standard, and said, okay, whatever they're doing is probably the bleeding edge. I remember back in the day, like Matt Cutts, I'd follow his blog, right. And like, those are people you kind of look to and said, like, they know what they're talking about. Everyone else is kind of just following those people. So how do you know now who are the people that are on the cutting edge and who are the people just following those people?
Yeah, it's, that's a great question. I mean, really, you can look at original research. I mean, that's one thing. We're always publishing every quarter original research on what we've done and where we're going. So there's, a track record of what we've got going, and, old school references too. Just talk to somebody that's, don't just look at the logos on the page, like say, okay, who did you work with here? Can I talk to that person? And just do a little bit of due diligence, because really that's the only way to do it. Because yeah, it's Wild West, but it's a little bit different too, in that like for SEO, it was very, people were just kind of doing black box stuff. And then the results would show up on the search engine results, which was also black box. So you kind of never knew at all what was going on. And with this, yes, the data science stuff is still black box, but what you get out of it, you have full visibility into. You're going to see everything that they tell you to do because of the model. And when you do that stuff, you're going to see the results from it. So it's a lot less. There's no switching costs like with SEO. With SEO, you kind of, once you pick a vendor, you got to stay there for like 6 months, because it takes months for the changes to show up. Whereas that's not the case with this. One thing that we've done at Trust Insights to kind of ease the pain of this is we have clear tiers of okay, you can start with, a report that costs $900 to run, where we just plug into your Google Analytics, and we already have some algorithms built, and we can just come back with a report for you saying, okay, based on your Google Analytics, here's what your customer journey looks like. Here's the campaigns that are working. And so then you can literally at that point be like, oh, okay, this campaign seems to be working really well. Let's test this one and double down on it. And does that help us out? And then from there you could jump to if you found that works, well, then you could take that model and, for 10x, you could build it for yourself and link it to your own data connections and have the integrations built. So now you can flesh that out with more data. But so somebody that's got a clear path like that, where you don't have to just drop $100,000 and pray that you have something to look at 3 months later, work with somebody where you can, just throw a few bucks to get started out of your discretionary experiment budget and, see if that works, see if you work with them. That's the best kind of advice we can give. And what'll happen, hopefully over time, is you always have vendors where they've kind of built up so much cachet that they become premium price. You just don't have access to certain vendors because they've proven themselves already a couple of times, and now everybody wants to work with them. But yeah, you can always kind of dig around and find somebody who at least can get you started with a couple reports, and then you can test that, and that will get you on the right path instead of just throwing a bunch of money at something and praying.
That's a good point, right? Because I feel like with SEO, how you mentioned, you basically have to hire someone, and it was always like a minimum, 3 months or 6 months, because you couldn't see results in one. So you'd essentially have to start paying them, and then whatever happens in the next 6 months, you'd say, well, it must have been them because they're the ones I'm paying. But like Google could have changed the algorithm at the same time, and you could have gone up or down and you would have done it anyway. So it's pretty much you're just guessing. But at least this, you get back a report, and then you could look at the data yourself, right, and say, okay, they told me these 2 campaigns are, the dogs, and we should take them out. You should get rid of them. At least then you can look at that data and say, are they really? And say, oh, they're right. They did find a couple, dogs in our campaigns. That works. And then we can expand from there. So I like that model, being able to, actually like experiment with this, test to see if you like them, and you can probably get it back pretty quick. And it sounds like those little, you said, was it $9.99 sort of thing? You can probably have some canned reports you can run against, I'm guessing, like Google Analytics. So it's stuff that you could probably do pretty quick and have like a small engagement, quick return, see if it works. And if you realize, oh, we spent $1,000, and now all of a sudden we can free up several thousand a month in marketing spend. Great, let's double down and try this again and figure out maybe pull in more data sources and connect that. So that's kind of how people are doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great that you can kind of just dig in, pick one point, test and experiment with that. And it's funny, and that's the same stuff that the vendor is doing on the other side that we do. But it's just that, like, for example, these canned reports, these have been refined over like 5 or 6 years. Chris has gone through 7 or 8 different models and discarded stuff that doesn't work and work. And so, yeah, just by throwing down a few bucks, you can run some of these tests on established models without having to build them yourself. And yeah, that's the kind of the real value in getting running.
So that's the thing with using a consultant, right? So they've done this. They've ran it against X number of data sets already, and they said, okay, this stuff does, like, you've refined it. So now when you run the report, you're not just, when you go into Google Analytics and you're like, hey, create new report, and you see all this data and you're like, okay, and you add like 2 columns and just slowly like wander back and like, I don't know what to do. This you've done it already.
All these projects, it's always the same. You go in and with your questions, and they always generate more questions. That you may get a couple answers, but they always generate more questions. And it's just like, you would never build your own email marketing automation system. You'd never build your own CRM. It's just, you deal with somebody who's taken the lumps for a couple of years, and and go that if it's not your core business, don't spend a ton of time doing it. I mean, you need to spend enough time so that you understand what the results are going to be and how it works. But yeah, let somebody else take the beating on the learning curve.
Got it. Okay. I think that makes a lot of sense. And it kind of starts giving a path to how you can almost like dip your toe in the water, right? Because when you start bigger picture, like the ultimate goal, pulling in 100 different data sources of, weather data and commodities data and shipping data, it sounds great, but it gets a little overwhelming. But just saying, we have some reports, and we found they worked for 100 other e-commerce sites. Let's apply the same algorithm to your site, see what comes back. That sounds more approachable, right? And you can start saying, okay, I could run that and just maybe something comes back, maybe it doesn't, but at least you can test it. And then if that works, then expand and pull in your, the soybean data and the weather data, that sort of thing, and see how that applies to your Facebook ads. And maybe it does.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it could be any kind of crazy relationships between the data, but if it was, if you had a budget of millions and you were going to throw some money at, that's fine. But for most people, it's a matter of, I need to be able to spend a couple grand and show some kind of return from that. And, if that works, great. But having something quick cycle, quick results, you can test it and verify, that just makes it easy to jump on board.
Very cool. I like that a lot. So people want to find you, kind of learn more about you, or check out the podcast. Where can they do so?
Yeah, sure. Marketingovercoffee.com is the podcast. Trustinsights.ai is the website for our data science consultancy. We light up dark data. That's our tagline. And and I'm on Twitter at John J. Wall. Feel free to give me a yell.
Awesome, John. Thank you very much for coming on today.
Thanks, Charles. I appreciate it.